Just when you thought Canada was all maple syrup and polite apologies, Justin Trudeau decided to roll up his sleeves and throw some punches back after Trump's tariff threats. Trudeau isn't playing nice anymore.
We're insulted. We're angry. But we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other. We're going to fight. And we're going to win.
But hold up, it's not just politics. Canadians on the street aren't exactly thrilled either.
I'm not ready to pay 1 cent more. Already prices are high.
Looks like Trudeau's not alone in this fight. Let's see how Trudeau's bold move might shake things up even more. Trump hits Canada with tariffs. US President Donald Trump just made life a little harder for American wallets. On Tuesday, he started charging a new 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada. He also hit China with extra tariffs. So now, we're officially in trade war territory. Why is Trump shaking things up like this? He says Mexico, Canada, and China haven't done enough to stop fentanyl, a dangerous drug, from coming into America. To him, tariffs are payback time. Trump told Congress, other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn. He even promised more tariffs starting April 2nd. But here's the catch. This trade fight affects a massive $2.2 trillion worth of goods every year. That means prices at your favorite stores are likely to jump higher. And that's not great news for Americans who are already fed up with rising prices. China isn't backing down either. They fired back with a strong message. If war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is still hopeful, though. He told reporters there might be some room for compromise with Mexico and Canada. The US talked with both countries all day, trying to reach a deal. Donald Trump has his own special way of fixing problems. If you ask him why he's putting huge tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, he'll say it's all about drugs, trade, and fairness. But mostly, it's about proving he's not running the stupid country anymore. Trump explained it like this. Last year, Customs and Border Protection seized enough fentanyl to kill every American 20 times over. He blamed Mexico and Canada for not doing their job to keep these drugs out. The White House insists it only manages to stop a fraction of the dangerous drugs sneaking in. So, Trump decided it was time for tough action. But is this tariff battle really about protecting America, or is Trump just angry about losing money? He complained, the USA has major deficits with Canada, Mexico, and China, and almost all countries, owes $36 trillion, and we're not going to be the stupid country any longer. Sounds like he's a bit annoyed, doesn't it? Trump then bragged about how important America's market is to other countries. Trade accounts for 67% of Canada's GDP, 73% of Mexico's GDP, and 37% of China's GDP, but only 24% of US GDP, he pointed out. In other words, these countries need America more than America needs them, at least according to Trump. He admitted his tariffs might cause some pain, but insists it will all be worth it. The question is, worth it for who exactly? If we take a closer look, even federal prison could not stop one drug boss from running his network. In June 2024, Jesus Amurahabi Celestine Ortega was indicted for drug trafficking. He was already locked up in Florence, Colorado for other crimes. That did not stop him. He had a smuggled phone and kept business running from behind bars. He was moving meth, heroin, and fentanyl across the country. His network reached North Dakota, Minnesota, California, Colorado, Georgia, Missouri, Texas, and Arizona. He was not just selling drugs. He was also moving drug money from the US to Mexico. Now he and 8 others are facing life in prison for drug charges. The money laundering charges could add another 20 years. Drug networks reach everywhere. They run from prisons. They move money across borders. Now they have even taken over daycares. In September 2023, Nicholas Feliz Dominici was dropped off at Divino Niño Daycare in the Bronx. He never made it home. The 22-month-old was exposed to fentanyl and died. 3 other children were poisoned but survived. The person running the daycare, Gray Mendez, had another business. She was running a drug operation right under the kids' feet. Law enforcement found over 11 kilograms of fentanyl and heroin hidden under the playroom floor. That much fentanyl could kill 500,000 people. Mendez was caught. She was sentenced to 45 years in prison after pleading guilty to drug charges. But that does not erase what happened. A daycare should be a safe place. Instead, it became a drug den. This is not the first time Trump has played hardball with tariffs. He believes making things more expensive forces other countries to listen. He has done it with China. He has done it with Mexico. Now it is Canada's turn. He thinks hitting their wallets will make them take drug smuggling more seriously. His biggest push is getting Ukraine to hand over $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals. He says if Ukraine wants help, they need to start giving back. He does not like how Zelensky is playing the game. He even called him a dictator, which did not sit well with other world leaders. But Trump does not care about that. He only cares about deals. Trudeau fires back. The drug war is not just about smugglers and border security. It is now tangled up in politics, and Canada is not backing down. Trump slapped a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, saying Canada needs to do more to stop drugs. But Justin Trudeau is not sitting quietly.
We're insulted, and we're angry, but we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other, we're going to fight, and we're going to win.
He says Donald Trump's new trade war is just a dumb plan to wreck Canada's economy. Trudeau thinks Trump wants Canada to fail so badly that the US can easily take over. Trudeau made these bold claims right after Trump slammed Canada and Mexico with a huge tariffs. Trump even put an extra 10% charge on Canada's energy exports. Trudeau quickly fought back with new taxes aimed at American products. In his speech, Trudeau reminded Canadians, "We've been in tough spots before, but we have not only survived, we have emerged stronger than ever, because when it comes to defending our great nation, there is no price we all aren't willing to pay, and today is no different." This is all happening as Trudeau gets ready to step down. His party will pick a new leader this Sunday. Before leaving, Trudeau warned that fighting between allies is exactly what Canada's enemies want. He pointed out how strange it is that Trump attacks Canada but acts friendly toward Russia and its leader, Vladimir Putin. Trump keeps making jokes about Canada joining the US, but Trudeau said that's never going to happen. To hit back,
The one thing he has said repeatedly, that what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy. Because that'll make it easier to annex us, is the second half of his thought. Now, first of all, that's never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state.
Canada will tax $107 billion worth of American goods coming into the country. The first taxes start right away on $30 billion of goods. Taxes on the rest will begin in 3 weeks, giving Canadian companies time to prepare. Trudeau didn't just talk to Canadians, though. He spoke directly to Americans, too. He said, "We don't want to see you hurt, but your government has chosen to do this to you. As of this morning, markets are down, and inflation is set to rise dramatically all across your country. Your government has chosen to put American jobs at risk at the thousands of workplaces that succeed because of materials from Canada or because of consumers in Canada." Then Trudeau turned directly to Trump himself.
Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Donald Trump says he put big tariffs on Canada because they weren't stopping fentanyl from entering the US, but Justin Trudeau called Trump's reason completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. In reality, very little fentanyl comes into the US from Canada. It's so small that the US Drug Agency didn't even mention Canada in a big report from 2020. Still, Trump doubled down. He jumped on social media to warn Canada that any payback from them would mean even tougher moves from America, because nothing says friendship like threats on social media, right? Trump's tough approach ended up uniting Canadians like never before. Leaders from all sides are now standing strong together against the US. Doug Ford, who runs Ontario, Canada's richest province, stepped up in a big way. He promised to make sure Americans feel pain if Trump's taxes keep going. Ford plans to charge a huge 25% tax on electricity going to 3 American states. Ford didn't stop there. He took American wines and spirits off the shelves in Ontario. He also banned US companies from bidding on government jobs, and to show he was really serious, Ford even tore up a deal with Elon Musk's Starlink company. Ford said he felt terrible about these moves since he has good friends among American governors, but he insisted he had no choice. The US government needed to get the message loud and clear. Ford had a little fun. He said Trump's tariffs would send America's stock market downhill faster than their bobsled team. When the market drops, that's the people speaking. Isn't this a shame? Every country is very, very aware that if the American government is willing to do this to their own closest neighbor, ally, and friend, everyone is vulnerable to a trade war, Ford said, pointing out the cost of Trump's decisions. He finished by reminding everyone that if America could turn on its closest friend like Canada, no country was safe from Trump's trade war. The longer Trump's tariffs last, the worse things look for Canada. If Trump keeps pushing, things could go from bad to awful really fast. François Legault, who leads Quebec, is already sounding the alarm. He warned that his province might lose up to 160,000 jobs jobs in just a few months. Legault isn't just worried, he's angry. He wants Trump to pay the price for choices that don't even make sense for Americans. Tim Houston, leader of Nova Scotia, didn't hold back either, called Trump short-sighted and said Trump is just throwing his power around because he can. After the tariffs kicked in, Houston described the situation as pure chaos for Canadians. Next door, Newfoundland and Labrador took quick action too. The government there ordered liquor stores to remove all American products right away. Andrew Furey, the province's leader, asked people to buy local Canadian products more than ever. Even Alberta's tough-talking leader Danielle Smith spoke up. She's usually friendly to American oil buyers, but this time she called Trump's move an unjustifiable economic attack on Canadians. She said it was foolish and a total failure. Clearly, Trump's new taxes haven't just stirred up anger, they've united Canadians from all sides against him. Trump versus Trudeau, a long-time feud. Justin Trudeau is standing strong against Trump's latest taxes, but these two aren't new to fighting. They've spent years trading insults, throwing public punches, and fighting over trade.
Well, Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years.
Some people think Trump still holds a grudge because his hotels in Canada flopped. Maybe losing money there made him cranky toward Canada forever. Others on social media have another funny theory. They point to a 2019 photo from a big meeting in France. In it, Trudeau seemed about to kiss Trump's wife, Melania. Was Trump annoyed that Canada's Prime Minister looked charming next to the First Lady? Maybe Trump's jealousy is behind all these new taxes. Whatever the reason, Trump seems extra annoyed with Canada lately. Canada is famous for being nice, so Trump's harsh treatment feels strange. It has thrown Canadian politics into a mess. People are confused and frustrated about why Trump picks fights with one of America's best friends. Even Stephen Moore, who once advised Trump, is puzzled. Moore said, "I can't quite figure it out." He knows Trump and Trudeau don't get along. With Trump, he said, everything feels personal, and Moore is right. Back in 2018, after a big meeting in Quebec, Trump called Trudeau very dishonest and weak on social media. Trump accused Trudeau of lying and even threatened to put extra taxes on cars coming from Canada. Trump's team jumped in too. Peter Navarro, one of his top advisors, said there was a special place in hell for leaders like Trudeau. That line shocked people. Navarro later apologized, but the damage was done. Trade was always a big fight between them. Donald Trump has always had a thing about Canadian dairy farms. You'd think he has a personal grudge against every cow north of the border, but what's the real reason Trump hates Canadian milk so much? It all goes back to one number Trump loves to throw around: a 270% tariff that Canada charges on American dairy. He tweeted about it back in 2018 and hasn't stopped bringing it up since. That number sounds crazy, and Trump knows exactly how to make it sound like Canada is robbing American farmers blind. Here's the catch though. Canada does charge super high taxes on imported dairy products, but Canada isn't picking on America only. They charge those high taxes to everyone. It's their way of protecting their own dairy farmers, but Trump can't stand these protections. For him, it's all unfair. He believes Canada is cheating American farmers out of money, and that makes him angry. After all, Trump hates losing money, especially when it's his voters losing it. Things got even worse in 2019 at a NATO summit in London. A short video appeared on Twitter, thanks to Canada's CBC, showing Justin Trudeau having a little gossip session with other world leaders. Trudeau seemed relaxed, talking casually like someone at lunch with friends, not like a prime minister at a big event. In the video, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was there, alongside French leader Emmanuel Macron.
Timekeeping.
Trudeau joked about Trump, saying Macron was late because Trump turned a quick chat into a 40-minute press event. He laughed, saying Trump's staff looked shocked by whatever he said. We didn't get the whole story though, since loud noises in the room blocked Macron's words, but the damage was done. Trump quickly fired back, clearly annoyed. He responded, "He's two-faced. I find him to be a nice guy, but the truth is I called him out on the fact that he's not paying 2% of national GDP towards defense, and I guess he's not very happy about it." After feeling the heat, Trudeau tried to fix things. He told everyone the leaders weren't laughing at Trump's speech. Instead, they were just chatting about Camp David, the place for the next G7 meeting. Then, Trudeau insisted everything was totally fine between him and Trump. "I have a very good relationship with Trump," he promised. But after all these comments, some Canadians probably rolled their eyes a bit. By 2024 was taking the feud to a whole new level. He called Justin Trudeau the governor of the great state of Canada. Trump made fun of Trudeau after he threatened Canada with heavy taxes on trade. Late at night, Trump posted on his social media, "I look forward to seeing the governor again soon so that we may continue our in-depth talks on tariffs and trade, the results of which will be truly spectacular for all. Trudeau's office didn't say anything back right away. Maybe they're still trying to think of a clever comeback. Trump has been joking lately that Canada should just join America as its 51st state. He even suggested it right to Trudeau's face during a dinner they had recently. Trump thinks the US loses too much money on trade with Canada and Mexico. He says America pays Canada more than $100 billion every year and Mexico even more. Trump asked, "Why are we subsidizing these countries?" For Trump, trade is simple. He thinks if other countries are making money, America must be losing. Trudeau didn't respond to Trump's jab right away, but he's probably busy thinking up ways to fight back. He did promise Canada would hit the US with its own tariffs. Trudeau's office stayed quiet when asked for a reaction to Trump's teasing. How this tariff war could shake up the economy. Donald Trump's trade war is hitting hard, and the stock market isn't liking it one bit.
Well, look, there's no question that Warren Buffett is right, that if you just raise tariffs across the board, then things will be more expensive. There's very little doubt about that. So Warren Buffett is right.
After Trump threw his new taxes at Canada, Mexico, and China, the markets went into free fall. The S&P 500 sank by more than 1%. The Dow dropped by over 300 points. And the Nasdaq, it lost almost 500 points. It looks like investors aren't loving Trump's great new plan. These new tariffs aren't small either. They hit about $1.4 trillion worth of goods. That's a lot of stuff from Canada, Mexico, and China. Experts say prices for cars, food, and many everyday things will shoot way up. Good news though, Trump promised the pain would only be temporary. He even thinks Americans won't mind a little short-term chaos, very comforting, but people who study money disagree. They think prices on groceries and cars will jump fast. They also worry thousands of Americans could lose their jobs because of this trade war. Trudeau himself warned Americans that Trump's tariffs mean higher prices for food, gas, and cars. And what did China do when Trump started playing rough? They slapped their own taxes right back on America. Starting March 10th, US chicken, pork, soybeans, and beef will cost even more in China. They're also punishing 15 American companies, stopping them from doing business in China. It's like a giant game of who can tax the hardest, and nobody's winning. Trump's attitude about all this is pretty casual. He brushed off the problems by saying there could be some temporary short-term disruption. In other words, just a little trouble. No big deal, right? But economists say it's not just a little trouble. Trump's decisions could really hurt America's economy. The big question now is how far he'll take this fight and how much regular people will end up paying for it. Economist Eswar Prasad says Trump's tariff plan creates an enormous amount of uncertainty for companies. Big companies hate surprises. They plan carefully and need to know what to expect next. Trump's sudden moves have thrown their plans upside down. Prasad warned that this uncertainty might stop companies from growing or even hiring new workers. Douglas Irwin, an expert on trade, pointed out another big problem. He said, past trade agreements simply don't mean much if the president can unilaterally violate them and impose tariffs with no checks at all. Basically, Trump just ripped up the rules he made himself 5 years ago. Now even his own trade deals can't be trusted. To make things even weirder, Trump's new tariffs came suddenly. Last time, he took time to investigate before acting, but this time, Trump just declared a national emergency and made the tariffs happen right away. His reason? Protecting America from drugs and immigration. But many experts think that reason feels weak at best. Businesses are confused too. Gregory Husishin, a trade lawyer, said companies are nervous about the future. He explained, I've talked to multiple companies that are saying, we're not moving forward with any investment. We need this to be settled. Trump's unpredictable decisions mean companies don't know how to plan. But it's not just big companies feeling dizzy from Trump's tariff roller coaster. Small businesses are feeling it too. The confusion is everywhere, and companies have no clue what's coming next. The Institute for Supply Management asked companies how they felt about Trump's latest moves. Turns out, they're not exactly thrilled. One transportation company complained customers are pausing on new orders as a result of uncertainty regarding tariffs. In simple terms, no one wants to order anything new until Trump figures out what he's doing next. And the hits just keep coming. Taylor Samuels owns a bar and restaurant in Dallas called Las Almas Rotas. He buys most of his alcohol from Mexico. Now, Trump's tariff chaos has thrown his plans into question. He wanted to build a new restaurant soon, but now he's unsure if he can afford it. That construction budget is now under review and may likely be delayed, he explained. Over in Chicago, Sandhya Dandamudi sells stone for projects, including the Obama Presidential Center. Developers make budgets years in advance, but Trump's sudden tariffs weren't weren't part of their plans. Those budgets will be blown, she said. Small businesses like hers could lose contracts or even shut down. Then there's Holly Ciderwand, who runs First Fill Spirits in Saratoga Springs, New York. She planned to nearly double the size of her shop in 2025, but Trump's tariffs forced her to press pause. We have no plans of adding more shelving or space for new items, she admitted. This will delay the growth of our business, making us a bit stagnant. It's not just bars and stone suppliers feeling squeezed by Trump's tariffs. Small shops in places like San Francisco's Chinatown are hurting too. Edward Lau runs Elysian Enterprises in San Francisco's Chinatown. Trump's 10% tariffs on Chinese goods have forced him to raise prices. Many of Lau's customers are elderly and on fixed incomes. He's worried the community, still recovering from the pandemic, will suffer even more if tariffs double. And if city stores aren't enough, farmers in the Midwest aren't having much fun either. Barb Kalbach from Iowa is feeling the stress too. China and Mexico are responding to Trump's tariffs by taxing American crops like corn and soybeans. Kalbach fears these tariffs will drop crop prices further, putting farmers already struggling with losses in even deeper trouble. So while Trump talks big about teaching other countries a lesson, small business owners and farmers across America wonder why they're the ones paying the price. People have lots of opinions about Trump's new moves. Some think his rules will help the economy. Others, like financial expert Darius Dale, aren't so sure. Darius Dale is the CEO of 42 Macro. He believes Trump's current approach could slow down the economy much faster than most expect. In an interview, Dale explained clearly,
one of the things that our grid model has been signaling for months now is that U.S. economic growth is likely to slow and actually slow faster than consensus expects. So that's new. That's different from where we've been for most of the past 2+ years. And
before Trump's second term began, Dale's models showed steady growth. But now, thanks to Trump's tough measures, they're seeing something very different. Dale even thinks Trump might be hurting the economy on purpose, trying to reset it to match his own plans. Dale sees Trump acting a bit like Ronald Reagan did years ago. When Reagan first took office, the economy took a big hit. His bold moves shook things up, leading to some pain before any improvements. Dale calls this kitchen sinking, describing it like this.
They're essentially trying to transition from a demand side economy and fiscal policy to a supply side economy and fiscal policy. And that process could potentially be painful, at least in the short term. And this is exactly what we saw when Ronald Reagan became president.
When Reagan first became president, stocks fell hard and the US economy slid into recession. But after this tough start, things eventually got better. Many think Trump is now following Reagan's risky strategy, making things worse first, hoping they'll improve later. Trump's no negotiation stand on tariffs with Canada and Mexico makes the whole thing even scarier. The moment Trump returned to the White House, the market became a roller coaster. At first, investors were hopeful. They thought Trump might bring big tax cuts and fewer rules. But soon he began talking tough tariffs and strict immigration laws, making investors nervous. They quickly began selling off stocks, worried about what might come next. Now, nobody knows exactly what will happen. Will Trump's big gamble pay off, leading to a stronger market later? Or will all this confusion drag America into economic trouble for years? Financial experts are split. Some think Trump's approach will cause lasting damage and chaos. Others see mixed signals, unsure what Trump is really trying to do. Many investors still think Republicans like Trump are good for the market because they're known to support business-friendly rules. But Trump's moves have everyone scratching their heads. One thing is certain, whatever Trump does next, it will shape America's financial future for years. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, check out the suggested content on your screen by clicking one of the cards displayed.
Aren't you crossing the border at the moment?
Tariffs.
The Trump-Trudeau tariff tango goes way beyond the response battles happening online. Many American and Canadian lives are being impacted by these tariffs and retaliations. Early in February 2025, President Donald Trump imposed tariffs on imports from Canada, but the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau isn't backing down with a fight. He held a press conference to say,
"This is a very dumb thing to do."
His blunt statement sent MAGA supporters into a frenzy, fueling outrage across the US. Now, tensions are at an all-time high, and America appears to be barreling toward an all-out trade war with Canada. With prices already skyrocketing and uncertainty looming, people are wondering, how long will this back and forth last? How deep will the economic damage run? MAGA's response to the tariffs. MAGA fans are reportedly losing their minds over Canada's bold stance against Trump's recent tariff actions. Some of them are allegedly outraged by the fact that Canadians aren't interested in American products anymore. This ex-user was furious with what he saw and tried painting a different picture by saying Canadians are now removing American-made products from their shelves that they already imported. More die-hard Trump supporters continued to point out this fact. They didn't seem to realize that the Canadian people don't care if they're already purchased. They're standing together against what they consider a threat to their country. Just like his people, the Canadian Prime Minister swiftly went into action to stand against what seemed to be a direct attack on the livelihood and sovereignty of his nation. Without an iota of fear or tolerance for the unimaginable tariff placed by the United States, Canada swiftly responded to the country as the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, declared that Canada would impose retaliatory tariffs on goods produced and exported by the US. This tariff is expected to cost the states an insane amount of money, as it targeted $155 billion worth of American exports. These came as a result of a 25% tariff placed by Canada, and there is already an immediate $30 billion implemented as of the announcement. The remaining $125 billion is expected to be implemented in the next 21 days. These figures are making headlines, but they're just a fraction of the actions the Canadian government is considering. The Canadian counter-tariffs weren't just implemented at random. They were meticulously designed to impact a vast array of American products in an attempt to bring about a sense of economic and financial devastation to these sections. Some of these sections include agricultural products, where items such as vegetables were subjected to increased tariffs. This move was going to serve as a blow to US farmers who focus on exporting their goods to Canada. Agricultural products being a target might seem like a mediocre decision on a small scale, but when you consider the tons of goods that are exported, you'll see that it's not a trivial matter. Another section of American goods to face tariffs were liquor and alcoholic beverages, which America holds in high esteem. The sanction has severe consequences on the United States distilleries and industries related to such. Canada also targeted consumer goods like clothing, shoes, and even perfumes. Manufacturers of these products have lost a large chunk of their target audience. The Canadian Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc said in an interview that the first phase of tariffs is largely consumer goods that we would import from the United States for which there is a replacement. The minister acknowledged that these counter-tariffs do add economic challenges for Canadians, but stated that their government and provinces have an obligation to support workers and citizens who are unjustly affected by this American decision. Canada's leadership proved to the world that they could stand their ground against what is seemingly an attempt at bullying an entire nation. Justin Trudeau tagged the decision made by the President of the United States a dumb one, and stated that the aim of a dumb trade war was to usher in the complete collapse of the Canadian economy. He claims that the United States aims to make it easier to annex Canada and has refused to stand by and watch it happen. Trudeau delivered a personal message to the US president where he, for once, agreed with the Wall Street Journal and confirmed that Trump's actions were indeed dumb.
Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
The Prime Minister would also speak on how the country has overcome the tight spots they've found themselves in. We've been in tough spots before, but we have not only survived, we have emerged stronger than ever, he said, and added, because when it comes to defending our great nation, there is no price we all aren't willing to pay, and today is no different. He would also call out some of the seemingly negative moves the United States has made, such as how they've shown interest in working with the Russians. He said Trump was talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, aligning with a murderous dictator. These allegations also allowed Trudeau to point out that Trump has been making repeated taunts at Canada, saying they should cede their sovereignty and join the US. That is never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state, he said. The Canadian Prime had a lot to say regarding this entire ordeal. He even directed his comments at US voters, where he said, "We don't want to see you hurt, but your government has chosen to do this to you." As of this morning, markets are down and inflation is set to rise dramatically all across your country, and added, "Your government has chosen to put American jobs at risk at the thousands of workplaces that succeed because of materials from Canada or because of consumers in Canada." In response to Trump's claims that Canada has failed to stop fentanyl from being smuggled into the US through its borders, Trudeau said the claims are completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. To make matters seemingly worse for the US, the Premier of Ontario, Canada's most populous province, confirmed that he would issue a 25% export tax on electricity sold to the United States. He also threatened to cut off the supply of electricity completely if the American tariffs persisted. This threat stands as a strong one, as Ontario powered approximately 1.5 million homes in the US in 2023. US states like Minnesota and New York heavily enjoy this electricity and are facing an imminent lack of it if the Premier proceeds to cut it off. Doug Ford also announced that he would stop the sale of nickel and several other rare minerals to the United States. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick allegedly called the Premier and instructed him to stand down. This instruction didn't receive the response Lutnick expected, as the Premier said he'd go harder. He would even go as far as saying his government would make sure Americans feel pain. Joining in Ford's stance against Trump, the Quebec Premier, François Legault, stated that his province could lose over 150,000 jobs in the next few months. He said in an interview, "We must be able to make Mr. Trump pay the price for decisions that do not make sense, even for Americans." In a move that seemed anticipated by the US president, Trump swiftly took to Twitter to share his response. He is now preparing to announce what he calls reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. These tariffs are said to apply to all of the United States trading partners that he feels impose tariffs and other unfair trading practices on the US. The US president intends to stack the new tariffs he's about to impose on the already existing ones, thereby making the tariffs even higher than what people might imagine. Some individuals are new to the idea of tariffs being imposed on countries. However, they aren't new at all, as they've stood as a tool various countries implement in an attempt to make more profit or broker a deal with whoever they're imposing the tariff on. Most times, tariffs are imposed on countries that have seemingly committed offenses as a way of punishment for their crimes. It's no wonder that people are perplexed by Trump imposing hefty tariffs on countries he considers America's trade partners. The tariffs and why they exist. Most tariffs that have been imposed on countries have reasons behind them. Some of these reasons are understandable, while others make no sense whatsoever. For instance, Trump's tariffs on Canada, China, and Mexico stand as a tool in the battle against the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Vanda Felbab Brown, a senior fellow at Brookings Institution, would state that these tariffs are explicitly linked to fentanyl. We are yet to see whether that linkage is disingenuous or whether it is, in fact, real. Some might think that the fentanyl issue in America isn't serious or is being exaggerated. It actually stands as one of the greatest narcotic issues the country faces to date. Its presence in the country became a core part of the border security debate in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. Trump would even point out that the three key trading partners were not putting effort into cutting off manufacturers and suppliers of the substance. It is also considered a sensitive issue because thousands of families have been affected by fentanyl overdose deaths. Most of these families stand with Trump's decision to place tariffs on these countries because they have refused to take action to halt the drug's supply. 2012 is considered the year fentanyl started arriving in America, and more than 500,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses since then. According to the Drug Enforcement Administration, popularly known as the DEA, 69% of all overdose deaths were linked to fentanyl. This showed that the problem was more severe than most people had thought. To most people's surprise, fentanyl has been used as a painkiller and anesthetic since 1959 and is regulated by the DEA. This hasn't stopped some individuals from illegally producing fentanyl-related substances outside the country, and the pills produced possess lethal doses of the drug. Just 2 milligrams of the drug is considered lethal, and some of these pills have been tested to have as much as double that quantity. One statement that left people shocked as regards to the tariffs placed on Canada and Mexico came from the White House, where they stated, "The government of Mexico has afforded safe havens for the cartels to engage in the manufacturing and transportation of dangerous narcotics," and added, "which collectively have led to the overdose deaths of hundreds of thousands of American victims." Their statement on Canada was even more shocking, as they revealed that Canada-based drug trafficking organizations maintain robust super labs, mostly in rural and dense areas in Western Canada, some of which can produce 44 to 66 pounds of fentanyl weekly. The new administration confirmed that both US neighbors have failed to attack traffickers, seize drugs, and cooperate with US agents on the matter. The tariffs have come as a solution to the shortcomings of these countries. While the war on drugs, especially fentanyl, is one that MAGA has made a major interest in, Trump also aims at using these tariffs to boost America's manufacturing. He spoke about using these tariffs to revitalize manufacturing and stop the country from getting ripped off by other countries due to imbalances that come with their trade. He also stated that these tariffs, with a mix of incentives, were used to entice companies to build their facilities in the US. Trump said, "We're going to bring the companies back," in an interview, and also mentioned how we're going to lower taxes still further for companies that are going to make their product in the USA. We're going to protect those companies with strong tariffs. Howard Lutnick, US Secretary of Commerce, stood in favor of these tariffs as they are a means of regaining the world's respect. She would go on to say, "They are taking advantage of us, they are disrespecting us, and I would like to see that end." Not only are the tariffs made to boost the country's domestic infrastructure, they also aim at raising revenue. This revenue can also be used to help pay for the tax cuts which the president promised. Trump intends on extending reductions in income taxes that were approved back when he was in power in 2017. Some of these income tax reductions are due to expire at the end of 2025. The president also put forward proposals to expand these tax breaks. Although these tax measures are expected to lead to a loss of over $4 trillion in government revenue, the government expects these implemented tariffs to be able to cover the cost. Tariffs can easily pay for that, Mr. Peter Navarro, a trade advisor to the president, said. He also stated that Trump wants to return the country to the days where tariffs pay for a majority of things which income tax is meant to pay for. The enhancement of local infrastructure is also not the only reason for Trump's tariffs. One major reason that experts have noticed is that Trump is using these tariffs as a negotiation tool. This might not seem obvious at first glance, but looking deep into the matter reveals the truth. The US markets staggered and have been closing lower than normal. This isn't affecting America alone, as its neighbors have seemingly considered reducing or even calling off their retaliatory tariffs. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick stated that the country remains in continuous talks with Canada and Mexico in a bid to prevent further calamity from befalling the nations. Both the Mexicans and the Canadians are on the phone with me all day today, trying to show that they'll do better, he said, also adding that the President of the United States was always listening and was open to a middle ground solution. Trump's plan on using these tariffs as a point of negotiation worked well in respect to Mexico, as the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum decided to put a pause on retaliatory measures. She planned on speaking with Trump to find a better way to make both nations happy with whatever decision they come to a conclusion. Canada isn't the only country the United States has placed seemingly huge tariffs on. China is one of the countries on the receiving end, as the US heavily depends on them on even what's considered as basic items. In response to these tariffs, China imposed targeted tariffs on US imports and put several companies, like Google, on notice for possible sanctions. This came as a measured response to the duties placed on Chinese imports. The public has been anticipating a formal announcement as to when President Trump and President Xi Jinping would speak. Their conversation stands as a step to potentially defuse the critical situation. It's obvious that Beijing's limited reply to Trump's imposition of the tariffs emphasized the attempt made by Chinese policymakers to avoid a trade war from occurring between the two countries. Mind you, these two countries are considered to have the world's largest economies. China's tariff is estimated to apply to about $20 billion of annual imports. This might sound like a lot, but in truth is almost nothing compared to the whopping $450 billion worth of Chinese goods that are subject to Trump's tariff action. Head of China economics under a UK-based research firm, Julian Evans Pritchard, commented that the measures are fairly modest, at least relative to US moves, and have been calibrated to send a message to the US. What exactly are the counter tariffs that China employed as a countermeasure against the US? For starters, they placed a 15% levy on US coal and LNG, and 10% for crude oil, farm equipment, and a small number of trucks. This tariff also hit big engine sedans shipped to China from the United States. The Chinese government also announced that they will begin an anti-monopoly investigation into Alphabet's Google. This came as a surprise, but also reminded the world how Google holds a monopoly as the world's search engine and doesn't leave room for competitors to strive. Several US companies, including PVH, which stood as the holding company for brands like Calvin Klein, and US biotechnology company Illumina, on a list for potential sanctions. China didn't stop there, as they also announced that they were imposing export controls on several materials, including tungsten, which is crucial for electronics, military equipment, and solar panels. To the world's surprise, Elon Musk, who seemingly stands as Trump's right-hand man, will also be affected by China's tariffs, as he will be charged for the Cybertrucks he ships to China. To most people's surprise, there are countries who haven't been hit with tariffs, but are suffering from the fallout of the tariffs and their financial implications on the market. One major country that's in this category is Australia, as they haven't faced any major tariff by the US. The Australian share market took a shocking dive, with the ASX 200 losing about $50 billion in what's considered its worst fall since 2024. This dip in the market is also expected to hit the Australian dollar, as it's set to depreciate against currencies such as the euro and the US dollar. This dip in value also hurts importers and travelers. The Aussie dollar is suffering renewed collateral damage from Trump's trade war. One question that comes to mind in Australia's case is if they'll be hit with Trump tariffs. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, over 97% of Australia's non-agricultural exports to the US are duty-free. As the world wonders what Trump will do, leading economist Justin Wolfers made a statement that best describes the US president's next course of action. "I've been talking to people all around the world, and there's nothing you can do but guess with this guy." Although most people might agree with what the United States president is doing in terms of using tariffs to make his country a better place, there are bound to be consequences. These tariffs come at the expense of several other trade parties, and they won't comfortably let his actions go without consequence. The tariff impact. Every action has a reaction, but in this case, every tariff against another country has consequences, sometimes severe, against those imposing them. The United States president might have good reasons for what he does, but sometimes these reasons could be overshadowed by the implications that come about. The first major negative consequence of Trump's actions comes against the American people and the increase in consumer prices they'll have to face. When tariffs are imposed on imported goods, it almost immediately leads to an increase in the cost of these products. These companies are aiming to make a profit and will seek to regain their loss from somewhere. Unfortunately, American consumers are made to suffer as importers pass the additional prices to them. This also leads to higher prices for everyday items. For instance, tariffs on Chinese goods caused a hike in prices of various consumer products and even acted as an additional tax on American households. The next major consequence people need to know about is a scenario that's known as stagflation. This is the combination of rising prices of everyday items and slowing economic growth. This scenario has stood as a major concern, as tariffs have contributed to increased inflation while also dampening economic activity. Economists in the country have warned that a mild recession could occur if such conditions continue without being checked. It could also lead to reduced consumer spending and business investments, further slowing down the country's economy. Another major negative effect caused by the newly implemented Trump tariffs is volatility in the financial market. The uncertainty caused by these incoming trade policies has led to increased volatility in the financial markets. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, for instance, experienced significant drops as investors reacted to the escalating trade tensions and its potential for a prolonged economic downturn. Continuous fluctuations in the financial market can bring a decline in consumer and business confidence, leading to a reduction in spending and investments made. One of the major consequences of these tariffs comes as a huge blow to American citizens who work in industries reliant on imported materials. While these tariffs are intended to protect domestic jobs, increased cost for components can lead to a reduction in profit margins, forcing affected companies to cut jobs or halt hiring. A good example of this can be seen in the steel and aluminium sector, where tariffs on these sectors have been associated with approximately 75,000 fewer jobs in the US manufacturing sector. This came as higher input costs made finished products more expensive and less competitive. The next major consequence that could have severe effects sooner or later involves the strain tariffs bring on international relations. These imposed tariffs have brought a sense of tension among the countries they have been imposed on. Its effect could eventually be seen in other critical issues and may even hinder cooperation in areas beyond trade. The last notable concern brought by Trump's tariff agenda comes as people question the effectiveness of this plan. Some people also wonder if he will truly be able to achieve the goals he has set and the plans he has put in motion. United Nations analysis stated that the US tariffs on China are economically hurting both countries. This statement came back in 2019, and it seems that things haven't really changed since then. Although Trump's plan on using the tariff as a means of negotiation worked to some degree, the consequences it brought have had a more devastating effect than expected. Instead of crippling countries that they were imposed on, supply chains were adjusted and imports shifted to other countries, thereby undermining the tariff's effectiveness. As we all know, tariffs against other countries aren't a new thing, as several countries in the past have had some sort of tariff imposed on them for one reason or the other. One country with experience in this is Germany. In May 2022, Russia imposed sanctions on Gazprom Germania and its subsidiaries. This came as a repercussion of Germany's decision to place the company under trustee management following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This move put Germany in a tight fix, as it was forced to search for an alternative gas supply to meet its domestic demands. This move had some severe financial implications, as it meant that Germany's energy regulators, the Bundesnetzagentur, had to source approximately 10 million cubic meters of gas daily from alternative sources. You heard that right. They had to source for such an outrageous amount daily. This unexpected shift landed a heavy blow on German taxpayers and gas consumers. An additional $5 billion annually, and the cost of gas was threatened to be further inflated as the economy minister, Robert Habeck, mandated that the Rieden natural gas storage facility be filled. To curb the financial burden brought by this sanction, the German government introduced a gas levy that aimed to distribute the additional cost of sourcing replacement gas across energy suppliers and end consumers. Some tagged this situation as the gas levy controversy, and although it was designed to stabilize the energy sector, it faced criticism for escalating energy prices for households and businesses. As with all tariffs and sanctions, a ripple effect occurred across Europe. The consequences of this sanction extended to neighboring countries, as Austria, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia found themselves victims of the levy's financial web. You might be wondering how these countries had relations with Germany in terms of energy. They were highly dependent on Germany's gas reserves and came together to urge Germany to abolish the levy. After years of acting on this levy, Germany was forced to respond to domestic and international pressure. They would make amendments to their energy laws and waive the domestic gas storage fee at border points and vital trading hubs. This change curbed pressure from foreign pressures, but seemingly made things worse at home, with domestic consumers facing a 20% hike. All this goes to show that tariffs and sanctions often have devastating effects on not just the country being sanctioned, but also countries that have ties with said countries. Regardless of all that's going on, one obvious fact about Trump's imposition of these tariffs is that he's simply doing them as a way of asserting dominance over his neighboring countries. He has seemingly proved his point that being able to startle the world by simply placing tariffs on your trade partners sends a shivering message around. If you enjoyed the video, don't go anywhere. Just click on any of the cards appearing on your screen right now and get even more exciting content. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.